Good evening, everyone, and welcome. It's time to call this budget slash special call board meeting of the San Felipe Del Rio CISD Board of Trustees to order, today being Monday, April 29th, 2024. Madam Secretary, would you call roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Luna Chavez,
Present.
Mr. Overfeld,
Present.
Ms. Gonzalez,
Here.
Mr. Mesa,
Here.
Mr. Galindo,
Present.
Ms. Haynes,
Here.
and myself. Sir, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Let the record show that we do have a quorum of board members and that this meeting was duly called in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. This time we will have opening ceremonies, first with a moment of silence for personal reflection, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. First item that we have is budget workshop, Texas Association of School Board Salary Study Report. Sandra Hernandez, and we have Jennifer Barton from TASB. Welcome.
Yes, sir. Good evening, President Mesa, Dr. Rios, and members of the board. Our school district engages with TASB's HR Services Division to be able to provide for us our salary study. And at this time, I'm going to pass the microphone over to Ms. Barton, and I'd like to welcome her this evening so that she can provide us with tonight's presentation.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me? Just a little bit here. There we go. A little bit better. Good evening. Thank you so much for having me here again this year. We TASB HR Services, has worked with San Felipe Del Rio for many, many years, and I've had the privilege of working with the district the past couple of years, and I'm very excited to be here to talk with you tonight about your pay maintenance process. We are going to go through our standard presentation tonight. I believe you did receive the report. Because this is a budget workshop, I do encourage you to ask questions and to feel comfortable with the information that we'll be presenting. I've always obviously worked with district administration this spring, but I am happy to help you or answer any questions that you may have this evening. So very quickly, I just want to review the process that we go through every single year. So the district does contract with TASB HR Services for a pay maintenance process. And basically what that means is we work with your district every year to work on your pay systems, as well as to provide support for district administration to be able to recommend a compensation plan for employees in the district. And so every year we go through the similar processes. We go through that data collection process to where we have meetings with district administration, as well as talk about goals for the year, anything that we see as needs that we may need to address in the compensation plan. And then we also collect the pay data and go through our processes internally to do some data analysis. Once we have all of that data cleanup, we go into basically the market pay review. So we look at the market data, and we'll go over those peer districts in just a minute. We match those common jobs, and so we have about 160 jobs that we match for within the data. And then we build models for improvement. So because this is a pay maintenance process, we actually align the pay structures and adjust employee pay with your current structures. We've built those models, and we've really worked over the years to get your pay system in a very nice place, so we want to maintain it. So that is why we do the pay maintenance process. And just very quickly, we're going to do a quick review. Just remember that for a pay system in a school district, that we use that for several reasons. We use it to recruit and retain employees. That is two of the key reasons that we have a strong compensation plan. We also want to make sure that we're paying for job value, and we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. And then, of course, and this is on the onus of the board also, to control costs, right? Being able to provide those pay increases within our budgeted means and balancing what we need for our employees as well as with the funds that we have within our district. And so again, we just align all of those jobs with each pay grade. This is very similar to the system that you continue. We don't usually, with the pay maintenance process, do any major overhaul unless the district requests it. This year we had very minimal changes. We just made sure that our structures remain competitive and that we provided some cost models for the district to be able to share for budgeting purposes. So the market districts are pretty much the same that we use every year. The only thing that may change is participation of those districts within the TASB salary survey. And so as you look at those districts, you can see the districts that have the X, basically, they participated in the survey. We were able to pull market data. Those districts that have a double asterisk, they did not participate in our survey, but we are able to provide teacher market data for those particular districts. This year we didn't have as good of participation from this area for the survey, and that does just fluctuate a little bit every year. So these are the same peer districts that we've used in the past years, and we use these districts because these are the districts that San Felipe del Rio compete with for employees as well as geographically for compensation. TASB HR Services also purchases 2 third-party vendors for non-school market. We use Economic Research Institute and Comp Analyst, and so we pull non-school market values for certain jobs, not all jobs, for the San Antonio metro area. We're going to move into our first group tonight. So the first group that we look at is teachers. Remember that teachers are our largest number of personnel, and so we usually put much of our budgeted funds towards our teachers. So we like to just quickly look at the demographics of our teachers. Remember, this is a snapshot in time when we're looking at our data. So at the snapshot of time, there are about 534 teachers in the district, and you can see the distribution of current teachers in the district of experience. Remember that we do pay our teachers by years of experience, and so what this is basically telling us that the district has a nice distribution within the pie pieces of experienced teachers in the district. And so that is what we would like to see. We would like to see that we have trained teachers, those teachers that are really doing great things for our students in the classroom. We also look at those teachers that are hired to the district each year. So this school year, at the time of this data, there were 29 teachers hired into the district, and 24 of those teachers had 0 years, so they were brand new to the profession, and that would equate to about 83%. You also were able to recruit in a couple of teachers, 4 teachers with 1 to 5 years, and then 1 teacher with 16 plus years. Here's the current market, and we're going to look at the values here in just a second. So this is the market graph for the district versus the market median. Remember that we do benchmark for 0, 5, 10, 15, and 20 years. And so looking here, you can see the orange line is San Felipe del Rio CISD, and then we see the market median at those years is the blue line. And what we like to see is that we're above that blue line at all points surveyed in the market. And we will look at that in values. You can see here that you're anywhere from 2 to 5% above market for your teacher pay. You have strong competitive pay values to market, and then basically your strongest year is at year 20, so you're about $3,000, a little bit more than $3,000 above market, and then your closest to market year is year 15, but you're still $1,280 above market. So this is very strong, and this does go to the great percentage that you were able to give employees last year. So kudos to the administration and the board. Any questions on your current market for teachers?
I just want to interject something here.
Yes.
For the benefit of board members, it's towards the end of the packet that you find,
Oh, okay.
okay?
Okay, thank you.
Mm.
All right, so the other thing that we do look at is our current teaching area stipends. And so this is really for those critical need or hard to fill areas. We don't look at every single stipend in the district. So we look here at what the district offers compared to the market median for the stipend, and then we also look at how many districts are reporting that they provide that stipend. And so you can see that the district does have a varied number of stipends that they do provide to teachers, and you can see too where some are above market median, some are below. What we typically say about stipends is if the base pay is very strong, that there may not be a need to have very high stipends. And so it is a balance. And so when we're looking at stipends and teaching area stipends, it really is based on the district's ability to recruit, retain, and to fulfill the goals that they're looking for when we're looking at providing those stipends. Looking at our other non-teaching groups, these are our other pay groups. We divide these into exempt and non-exempt positions. So those exempt are going to be our central administration, which would be directors and above. It would be campus administration, which is our principals and assistant principals. And then professional is going to be all of those other exempt positions. So that would be your counselors, special ed related services, librarians, instructional coaches, some of your HR and business folks, and some other professional positions. And then we break our non-exempt or hourly positions into 3 groups, where we have clerical and technical, instructional support, and auxiliary. So looking here at the comparisons to market for all of these groups, we can see that there is a range between even with market at 100% to 12% above market. When we're looking at your exempt positions, you're anywhere from 100 to 104% of market. And then looking at your non-exempt, we're anywhere from 100 to 112. Anywhere above market is a good place to be for our non-teaching groups. When we look at pay grade midpoint to market, we're still competitive here in a range between 96% and 113%. And remember that your midpoints are your market values, and that's how we align your structures. And so we look at those pay grade midpoints every year, and we do make adjustments to your structures to ensure that the district remains competitive for your pay grades. When we're looking at our hourly positions, we also want to look at our minimums, which would be our starting pay. And the district has worked hard over the past couple of years to really increase the pay floor. And so you can see there that it is represented in your market values, to where your market values for pay minimums are anywhere from 105 to 119% to market. That is very strong. Questions on non-teaching market? Okay. All right, and so we'll go through our recommendations. So recommendation 1 is to implement the pay structure adjustments to align with market. So we looked at your adjustments, your structures, we adjusted, we made sure that we are providing those competitive starting salaries, that we're keeping that pay floor competitive, but we're also providing strong minimums for your professionals and your exempt positions. We also ensure that the midpoints are aligned with market value, so that's where we bring our market analysis in and we make adjustments accordingly. And then we ensure that jobs are aligned within the structures. The district has worked very hard over the years to be able to align jobs where they would like them, and so no major moves are needed with the pay maintenance process because they're all in a very good place. The second recommendation is to adopt a general pay increase to maintain market position. So the district administration requested 3 models to start for this year. We are providing a 1%, 2%, and 3% for all job groups. So looking at that GPI, we use the market median salary of $63,261 for teachers, and we calculate the percentages off of that number. For your non-teachers, we're calculating the percentage off of the employee's pay grade midpoint, and that is the continual, consistent methodology that we've used over the years. Recommendation 3 is to provide adjustments to address market differences and maintain equity. So with this recommendation, we're looking at individual pay for certain employees. So there were a few adjustments to the teacher hiring schedule that we did add for 2 reasons. One, to ensure that teachers at certain years of experience are making at least what they were making last year or more, or to help with market competitiveness. We were able to put a few adjustments in for teachers this year, but we did not need as many, which means that we have really moved the needle for teacher pay, which is a good thing. So that's been a really positive piece. We also have adjusted those structures, so for your non-teachers, if there's anyone that's below the minimum after the general pay increase is applied, then we would give them an additional percentage to move them within the range. And what this helps is for any current employees to not be leapfrogged by new employees with the same years of experience. We want to make sure veteran employees are not making less than a brand new employee at the same years. We also did apply those teacher pay equity adjustments, which means those positions in the educator career pathway, making sure that those are strengthened and those individuals are making at least what they would be making in the classroom or more, since we are trying to incentivize those educator leadership positions. And then we did apply some strategic adjustments for certain employees, where after the general pay increase and any other adjustments are applied, we look at their salary, and if they're still below 90% of market, we will give them an additional percentage to help move them a little bit closer to midpoint and a little bit faster. And then for your non-exempt groups, your hourly groups, we did apply a placement scale for both of those groups. And what that does is it aligns pay by experience, and it alleviates compression, but it also speeds up determination for those employees for their pay to move to midpoint a little bit faster. Recommendation 4, we recommend that the district continue to annually review the district compensation plan and update as needed to maintain market competitiveness. So doing the market analysis every year, making any adjustments to structure, and then addressing employee pay as needed and within budgeted funds. So we do have 3 cost estimates. The first model is a 1% as requested. And so you can see what that general pay increase would cost, what the adjustment costs would be, and then the estimated total increase. And then we've also provided that for the 2% and the 3%. And so typically, if you give less in a general pay increase, then you tend to have a little bit more in adjustment costs. If you give more in a general pay increase, you tend to have a little bit less in your adjustment costs. It was a very quick presentation, but I am open to answering questions or any discussion you may have for me.
Board members, now's the time.
Sure.
Mr. Orfeld?
Why not? Okay. So in one of the graphs here, or a couple of them, when we were looking at market comparison. So central admin market comparison, when we look at the items that were that are listed there on page 6, it goes in and shows where we're well over, or areas that are well over for market comparison there. And so central admin got some real overages. Campus administration, about 8% overage. And then, you know, different things like athletic trainer, accountant, speech language pathologist. We have some clerical that's over, but that's getting into hourly. So I don't want to get into the whole hourly discussion. So the recommendation from TASB is 1%, 2%, 3% across the entire board there. With what we're facing in lack of funding from the state of Texas, because again, it's the state of Texas that put us in this position, and previous recommendations and ideas about different areas in which to try and cut back and make up. I can see teacher, paraprofessional, and auxiliary, and this will make me unpopular with some people, but I can't see one for administrative, on the administrative side there. Since we're already over in a lot of those areas, and that'll just push us further over, and that's just more of an encumbrance. And I know when we look at it, it's, you know, administrative professional, we're looking at $226,000 at 1%, or $390,000 at 2%, and $554,000 at 3%. and, you know, yes, some of the paraprofessional and auxiliary are definitely more than that at 1%. And then once we get into the 2%, like you said, it starts to become a little bit less when we're going in and having to adjust. But I mean, still $400,000, $355,000, so forth and so on. That all adds up, because once done, we know that it is an every year thing after that. You can't back down off your pay scale once you've gone up. It's a fixed cost every time we give a pay raise. Last year, this time, the board went in and it gambled and had faith. It had faith that the legislature was going to do something, and we gave a pretty large pay increase last year. We did what, 6%?
6%.
Yeah, 6%, with the hope that the legislature was going to do something. Unfortunately, we saw how that panned out, and districts across the 1,031 districts across the state of Texas were left high and dry. I'm sure a lot of us up here, I'm sure all of us up here would love to give at least a 1% or more. And yeah, I'm on board with that. I just don't know if I'm on board with it for anything over teacher. Anything over 187 days. And there, and again, that might make me some unpopular with some people, but we're also looking at the whole issue of cutting back in certain areas of 14 different positions as well. So,
May I address
sure.
your statement? So when we say over, are you talking about market comparisons? Maybe like a position's 8% or the group is 8%
Yeah, like
above
CTE
market?
coordinators, 21% over market.
So we need to remember too that that is an average. And so that doesn't mean that every employee is being paid that. And also we have to assume that the market's going to shift anywhere between 2 and 3%. And so while we're competitive this year, very quickly you can become non-competitive in certain positions. And so while it is okay to say, you know, we don't want to give this to certain groups, we just need to be really mindful about what groups we're picking and choosing that for, just looking at those market values for those jobs. So I think it's just, while they are above market, we do want some positions to actually be above market and to be in a competitive range that is more than 100% of market, especially in education, because of our staffing shortages and our issues to recruit and retain right now. And so making sure that we are above market for certain positions is actually a strategy that we would recommend. Granted, I know that funding is an issue, but that is something just to consider when we're looking at market values.
Correct, but going back to that one that I used as 21% over, that's one position in the district. If we were talking, you know, a whole bunch of teachers being 21% over and stuff, then I could understand that. But not for one position being 21% over or market. And even if that falls to 18% because of increases and stuff like that, it's still well over. It's still well over market. There's others that are on there that are well over. Let's see, what was that there? No, that's athletics. There was what's that next one down? There's one at 12%. One at 12%, a coordinator at 12% over. So what I'm getting at is we're somewhat top-loaded, front-loaded on admin. And I don't see it not necessary to increase that because of what we're facing. Again, it's an unpopular opinion, and it's you know, there's no winner in any of that there, because we're going to upset someone. So I just those are my thoughts on it. There, I'm all for going in and giving a pay increase. As to what percentage that ends up being is ultimately what the 7 of us decide. But I think there may need to be some areas that maybe need to be excluded this go round. And if the legislature funds us, then we'll bring it back in a year and be able to readjust. You know, there are districts right now that are giving very large pay increases, but they're gambling that the legislature, they're doing what we did last year. They're hoping that the legislature funds what they're going in and doing, but they're also going very deep into their fund balances, if they have any. So it's a catch-22, unfortunately. But I'm interested to hear what my other colleagues up here have to say about it. Again, those are just my thoughts on it. And I appreciate all the work that y'all do. They're going in and collecting all the data from across the area so that we have a comparison. So I do thank y'all for that. Mr. Mesa?
Thank you, Mr. Orfeld. I want to mention a couple of things. You know, the salary study is one thing that we have every year to make sure that we're competitive. And again, for me, a big thing is to retain teachers that have, you know, the years of experience and so forth. We're kind of in a predicament. It's a very unusual place to be this time of the year where we have 1%, 2%, 3%, and we gave 6% last year. You know, we're even talking about 0% increase, you know, because of the shortfall in funding. But, you know, one thing that I want to stress, you know, and board members to keep an open mind, because we still have a little bit of time, not a whole lot, but we need to be creative in ways of keeping our staff. That's one thing that, you know, with the money that was left with the legislative session that ended and the money just hanging there, there's no predicament as to what, you know, how long it's going to take for us to be able to get some of that money. And other districts pretty much are in the same predicament that we are. But I'm looking at ways, because every time that I served for 37 years and we get a bit of increase in pay and the insurance goes up or something else offsets, you know, the increase in pay that we got. And this year, we're having an insurance update later on in the meeting, and it was projected it's going to be 6.5% increase, but we haven't heard all of it yet. So we still can be creative, board members. I think the one thing that I would like to focus on is insurance. How we can save some money there to be able to provide for the staff and keep our staff. That's one thing that I want to stress that to board members, that we need to do everything possible to keep our staff, and you know, but we just need to be creative. I think for the last 3 years during convocation, I mentioned to teachers, you know, at one point or another, we're going to have to ask you to contribute towards your insurance premiums. And if we can be creative in that way to be able to save jobs, then now's the time for us to be able to do that. It has nothing to do with the salary study. I thank you for doing the salary study, but when I look at 1%, 2%, 3%, I'm thinking we've got to keep our staff. That's what I'm looking at, to keep our staff. And so, again, these are my thoughts. And I have some ideas that I'm going to run through Dr. Rios to be able to, everybody contribute a small portion that even hourly wage can afford, so that we can keep our staff. And I know that as you go doing their salary studies throughout the different regions, and you'll find that a lot of districts are adopted a deficit budget.
Correct.
One thing I did ask Dr. Rios, we're not going to cut staff, are we? Nope, we're not going to cut staff. And that's one thing that I want to assure the audience here, that we're trying our best, and we're going to do everything possible to keep everyone that we have. So, anyone else want to interject? Mrs. Webb?
I just want to thank you for the study, because we definitely have a lot of things to look at and consider and keep in mind as we move forward. But the study that you did definitely tells us and guides us as to where we need to be. So thank you so much for taking the time to do
Absolutely.
this.
It's always a pleasure to
Yes,
be able to
ma'am. Thank you.
provide information to the district. Yes.
Anyone else? We thank you. Dr. Rios?
I'm sorry. I know that it's difficult budget season for everybody in the state. But as difficult as the budget season is, I do want to point to the board that this is the first year that everybody's salary, at least on the teacher matrix, this is the very first year, because of the aggressive raise that was provided last year, but this is the very first year that all groups are above the market in the teacher group. And that didn't just happen with the 6% that was provided last year. That's been a work in progress, probably for 8 years now, where we would go a little bit, then maybe down a little bit, but there's a significant gap now between us and the rest of the market. And if we go back and we analyze pay studies before, we had never been above United ISD or Laredo ISD. We'd always been above San Angelo, but never above the bigger schools like Laredo and United. And the cost of living, at least in my own experience, is a lot higher in Laredo, yet this board worked over the past few years to increase that. So cost of living is less in Del Rio, but we pay more than Laredo. I'm not saying it's going to be this way after this year. I don't know what they're planning in terms of raises. But as hard as it is, I think the board members should find some comfort in knowing that up until this point, y'all have provided a very competitive salary. So anyway, I just want to point out this is the very first year we're above the entire market.
Yes, very strong. And that's definitely a testament to the work, because being a smaller school district within a market that has larger districts, that is a challenge to be able to do. And we did talk about that in our discussions, yes.
Just want to mention something else. We're so proud that hourly wage, and now it's, we're doing a minimum of $15. We're getting to that area where everybody else, because the cost of living is horrible. Cost of living, the increase in everything, projecting gas will go up by paying $4 a gallon this summer, and I hope it doesn't happen, but everything goes up, and so we have to be, again, providing for our employees. So I'm especially grateful for our board doing something about hourly wage to bring them up to par. And thank you for your study. And again, we'll take all this information and later on during our next budget meeting, we'll make a decision.
Absolutely. Any other
Anyone
questions?
else? Thank you very much.
All right. It was always a joy. You all have
Thank
a good
you.
evening.
Next item we have is item C, 2024-2025 budget projections, Amy Childress. The lady with the money. Not this year.
Am I gonna do the health update first? B?
Ma'am?
He jumped to C, am I gonna? Oh. I'm sorry, he mentioned
Oh, I'm sorry, B, health.
B, can I start B?
Let's do the health insurance. That's the,
Good evening, President Mesa, Dr. Rios, and members of the board. This evening, I would like to provide you with some updates on the district health plan options that we have asked for you to consider. First of all, to help in our discussions regarding the district health plan, I'd like to start with a look at the prior year's district cost per employee. So this slide shows the prior year's self-funded district cost per employee. If you'll see in fiscal year 1920, from the change from 1819 to 1920, the district contribution remained at $493.08 per month per employee. For fiscal year 2021, we increased our district contribution from $493.08 a month to $558.08 a month per employee. For fiscal year 21-22, we increased from $558.08 a month to $643.78 a month per employee. In fiscal year 22-23, we decreased our contribution from $643.78 per month to $543.78 per month per employee. And then in 23-24, this last fiscal year, we again increased our contribution from $543.78 a month to $640.01 a month per employee. Based on the information we have at this time, for 24-25, our projected increase for the self-funded cost per employee would go, in order to sustain the 6% increase we're expecting, would go from $640.01 a month to approximately $958 a month per employee for the district contribution. Another look at our current self-funded plan is at the fund's net position. As you can see, each year other than fiscal year 21-22, our planned expenditures exceed our planned revenues, resulting in a deficit. Fortunately, we have had a fund balance that we've been able to draw from during those years to be able to cover the deficits. In fiscal year 21-22, we were fortunate enough to have the ESSER funds, so that helped the COVID claims we were able to use the ESSER funds for. So therefore, if you see, it built our fund balance to a little over $4.8 million in the self-funded account. However, as you can see, each year it continues to have a deficit drawing from that fund balance. And if we can continue in that direction, we currently are estimating to end this year with a fund balance in the self-funded fund of a little over $1.3 million. However, that we will not be able to sustain and keep that fund balance if we continue to have the deficits and the fund balance that we're currently experiencing.
Dr. Rios?
I just want to add a little bit. What this slide means is that in addition to the amount that the district contributes to cover the insurance costs of the self-funded plan, in addition to that, we draw down from fund balance to continue to pay. So the total cost of the insurance is way more than, for example, in 23-24, way more than the $640 per employee. Because you take the $640 per employee, and then you look at what we drew down on the fund balance, and that's additional cost. So it's a lot more costly than what the first graph indicates, because the first graph doesn't account for what's borrowed from fund balance to continue to sustain the self-insurance plan. Just making that point, Mr. Mesa.
Before you go, Amy,
Yes, sir.
can I ask you a question here? These are projections. When is the final?
So at this time, we don't have to,
I'm talking about insurance.
for insurance, we don't have to, we're not adopting the health insurance plan during the budget process. All we're adopting is the funds that we are wanting to allocate towards that plan.
Yes, that, I'm not,
As of we have to do that by June 30th.
June 30th.
Yes, sir. We have to decide on our plan more or less the 1st of September.
Okay, because again, these are projections.
Yes, sir.
We don't know for sure yet. Dr. Rios?
Mr. President, unfortunately, we won't know the projection, the actual numbers until, because our planned year for health insurance runs through the end of the year. It's actually through December of this year. That's our health insurance plan year. We won't know the final cost until probably March, when all the bills come in. We're providing this projection based on the spending patterns up to now. So for example, it's April, we know what we spent through February. and then comparing that to last year's expenses. So this is a projection. It could be slightly lower, it could be slightly higher, but that is a very good estimate within any standard little deviation. We hope it's less this year than it was last year, because for the fiscal year 22-23, those are actual costs. It's just this last year that we're estimating.
Okay, because the reason I'm asking that is we have a deadline of May the 3rd that I saw in some of the handouts that we received today for us to make a final decision
No, sir.
for our input. We're going to cover that later on. I see that by May the 3rd, we have our input to be able to decide.
We have our district health survey that we put out to the employees that we're asking for their input. That
Is it-
deadline is May 3rd.
May 3rd?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because what I want to do is, the only thing that can save us at this point is the insurance. That's a big ticket item. And Dr. Rios, I would like to, and again, I'm going to interject this while you're doing the presentation, not finished yet, but we need to do an interlocal agreement with either Region 20 or Region 19 to be able to get other insurance companies to be able to give us some valuable input so we can make a decision, because I don't want to go into TRS and be locked in for 5 years. Dr. Rios?
So if we do an interlocal agreement with any company other than Brown and Brown, okay, that interlocal agreement would automatically make them our consultant, which means that they would do a market analysis of what it would cost to bring other players to the table. They could do that, and they could do it fairly quickly. But that would make them our insurance consultant. So we would be telling Brown and Brown, this is the end of the road, and that's a board decision. You know, I'm not saying anything different. That's a board decision. But based on our own research, I would be extremely surprised if a different consultant provided a more affordable option than TRS Active Care. But again, that's the board's decision. Y'all just tell me, and we'll do it.
Well, I'm saying, you know, I'm going through every scenario that I can with the experience that I've received, not only locally here, but outside of the district, where, I mean, I realize that the insurance is the one factor that is causing us to have this conversation where we're going to have to make some very critical decisions here. And I don't want to cut staff. I'd rather get rid of our consultant if it's going to give us a better premium on insurance. We have to look at everything possible. I don't care if Brown and Brown is not our consultant anymore. I'm trying to get the best insurance premiums and the best value, because I know that once we go into TRS, we're locked in for 5 years, whether employees like it or not, whether the deductibles are huge or not. I don't want to make that decision where we're locked in, can't get out. That's correct?
Yes, sir, it's in our presentation here in the next couple slides. Another point of clarification, if I may, Mr. Mesa.
Sure.
If we do a memorandum of understanding with where's Ms. Johnson? She's not here? If we do an interlocal agreement with a vendor that's listed on that buy board or any one of those co-ops, okay, in essence, you're selecting the consultant without an RFP process or RFQ process. We're just picking one consultant. And I just want to be clear on that, because that's, well, that's just the way it is. It's not like we can do a list.
whatever is required, RFP, RFQ, interlocal agreement to save jobs, yes, we need to do everything that we can in our power. I'm just saying that right now because sooner or later, we're gonna have to make a very critical decision. I wanna have all the information provided. I wish everyone that runs for election, we're gonna work with the city, county, and school district, and if we could all get together for the benefit of insurance for all, it would benefit us tremendously.
Okay.
It doesn't happen. Dr. Rios?
I wish that the city, the county, and the school district would all have the same insurance provider. It might help us some. However, the budget that's approved, we're not selecting the insurance provider. We can't select a cap on what we would contribute, but we really don't have to make a decision until, at the latest, what's the last day that we have for the, for TRS Active Care?
To let TRS know, it's by September 7th.
So we really have between now to September 7th to pick which direction we're gonna go in insurance. So making the memorandum of understanding with a vendor, it's not something that we have to do this coming week because we have between now and September. So what I'd like to do, if the board president and the other board members are okay with it, with this weekend's update, I'll share with y'all some steps that we would follow to enter into a MOU, provide all that information. And then if y'all still want to do that, I think what would be appropriate would be to have a special call meeting so that the board can direct us, administration, to do an interlocal agreement with somebody. But I'd like to first provide y'all that information so that we can all understand exactly what that involves. Now, that would require another meeting, but I think, or we could wait till the first one in May, the board meeting, but we can also have one the week before that if the board would like. It's whatever y'all prefer.
You know, I'm thinking out loud, and I just, think of the start of the school year in August, and, we have to make a decision here coming up pretty soon. And so the sooner the better. Again, interlocal agreement, if we can get better premiums, I just know that too many districts, and you can look up Southwest ISD if you want to, they had TRS. They dropped it years ago. You're locked in for 5 years, you can't get out. And they can do whatever they want to with the premiums, and you're locked in. I'm just saying that we need to be, again, thinking the one thing that's gonna save us is the insurance. That's the one ticket item that if the projection is 6.5, we don't have the final numbers until March, April. We have to look at the insurance and see if there's a better plan for us out there. To me, and again, I'm thinking out loud. I'll borrow from the fund balance. The first financial rating does nothing for me. I'd rather save jobs than have a first financial rating of an A for our district. We've never have borrowed, fund balance and not have the 75 days. Whatever we need to do, if employees need to contribute $50 per pay period to save jobs, I'm all for it. But I think we need to work out some numbers, including insurance premiums, and then a contribution from employees so we can make up a difference to be able to have our employees back next year. I'm sorry to interject, while you're still doing the presentation, but I just have to say that the one thing that's gonna save us is the insurance. But I think it's time for us to look at our employees and say, contribute so we can keep everybody working. And again, for the benefit of our students. I'm not doing this just for the employees, I'm doing this for, we're all making this for everyone involved, especially our students. Okay, I gave my speech. Sorry. You want to go on?
So as you alluded, in addition to the self-funded fund balance, you're correct, our general fund balance cannot continue to sustain the current contribution amount of the $640 that we are currently contributing. So we are looking at ways to reduce that cost. So in discussing the options that we have provided for you at this time, we are proposing, as part of the 24-25 budget, to reduce the district's monthly contribution per employee from $640.01 to a projection of $420 per employee. This is currently we had proposed $376, but I've updated that information based on new information I have, based on the Region 15 TRS active care. The prior rate I had was for Region 20, and so we've updated it to the Region 15 projection at this time.
Can I interject a question here again?
Yes.
That rate goes up after 1 year, doesn't it?
Yes, so that's the proposed amount I currently have is the 23-24 primary care rate, yes. Their new rates come out, I believe, May 1st. So we will update it at that time. And then if we do go forward with the TRS Active Care, we also have that transition period that we'll be talking about, where they will assign us a rate based on the claim information we will provide.
So every region has a different number?
Yes, sir.
Can I add? And what's unfortunate about that, board members, is that, you know, the amount that we had shared, or that had been shared with us before, was approximately $370.
$376.
$376. That was Region 20. So just by belonging to Region 15, that amount goes up almost $70 per employee per month. So not only does it go up every year, like insurance does everywhere, but just by being geographically situated in a different part of Texas, they have varying rates, and this one would be higher for us. And again, you know, like all insurances, it will more than likely go up every year. The only reason TRS Active Care is the most affordable plan, I'm not saying it's the best plan out there. The only reason it's the most affordable plan, and the consultants that I spoke with assured me it would be the most affordable plan, is because the state of Texas dumps in over $1 billion to sustain that plan. Unfortunately, in the district, the Board of Trustees are the only ones that can pump money into it at the local level, so it costs our fund balance. But the state of Texas pumps in over $1 billion to sustain TRS Active Care. That's the only reason that it's cheaper than any other plan out there. Not the best plan, but the less expensive one.
For the purpose of today's presentation, we would continue the self-funded insurance plan for the first 6 months of the year, for July through December of 2024. Then starting in January of 2025, we would operate the TRS Active Care Plan. Our contribution would stay the $640.01 for July through December. And then starting in January, our monthly district contribution would drop to the proposed $420 of the TRS Active Care Plan. The employee contributions would possibly increase based on the TRS Active Care Plan that's chosen by the employee. There are 3 options that they could choose from. This would provide a general fund decrease of $1,148,899 for our general fund balance.
Just want to interject something here. I've looked at all the plans, and the basic plan is the one you're talking about. Once you go into the higher plan, it comes out to about what we're paying now, pretty much. The deductibles are horrible. $2,500 deductible for the basic plan. And again, you're locked in for 5 years. I'm just saying, okay, I'm sorry to be interrupting you, but I just want everyone to know the information, because again, there's a lot of information that board members need to look at before we make a final decision. Sorry.
With that transition.
Sorry,
I'm
did
sorry.
you have a question, Ms. Webb?
I just want to ask, well, I guess a question or make a comment. Is there any possibility that we can look at TRS active care and make a projection for the 5 years that we're supposedly being locked in as to the increase every year?
No, ma'am. All we can do is look at the historical data and see how they have increased over the past 5 years, but that is as close as we can come. And we'll provide that in a board update just so that y'all can see how it's increased. Unfortunately, that's no guarantee that if it only increased $50 a year every year, there's no guarantee that for the next 5 years it'll only increase. Mr. Messa's very right in being concerned because we don't know what they're going to increase to. Historically, that might be a good educated guess, but it's still a guess, ma'am.
And then on the other hand, I guess you also probably increase deductibles as well. Just like Mr. Mesa mentioned, the deductibles are horrible.
Yeah, that probably, that's a plan, and that's written into the insurance documents. That probably won't increase.
Okay.
The deductibles will not increase, but the cost per employee will. So when we sign on to the plan, we sign on to the insurance documents, and what they show is where they're at. It's the cost per employee that more than likely will increase, just like with any insurance plan out there.
Thank you, Amy.
Yes, ma'am. So again, if we were to move to the TRS active care, part of that would constitute what they call a special transitional plan, because their plan year starts September to August, whereas our current insurance plan is a calendar year, January through December. So they would do, again, what I called a special transitional plan for our district. It gives us the flexibility to transition into the TRS September 1 to August 31st timeframe. Again, we have to notify TRS 90 days prior to the date coverage to start for employees, which I misspoke earlier, would be September 5th, 2024, if we decided that that's what we wanted to do. The rates will differ from the Region 15 during the transitional period, because they will they've already asked us for our claim information through May 31st so that they can review our claims. They will set a price for our transitional period for the first 8 months. Once we hit September 1st of 2025, then we will be part of the Region 15, and we will align with the rates that are set for Region 15. So I do have just a very, a TRS active care plan summary. I did provide at the end of your reports. It's a highlights that shows a little more detail on all 3 plans. Again, but for today's presentation. So there are 3 plans that the employees could choose from. They are the TRS Active Care Primary, the TRS Active Care Primary Plus, and then they have a TRS Active Care High Deductible Plan. So for the TRS Active Care, the primary plan, based on the $420 projected contribution from the district, if the employee is on an employee-only plan, they would not have any additional contributions. If they are on an employee and spouse plan, the employee contribution would be $714 a month. If they're on an employee and child plan, the employee contribution would be $294 a month. And if they're on employee and family, their contribution would be $1,008 a month. Again, as Mr. Mesa mentioned, the individual deductible for this plan is $2,500, whereas the family deductible is $5,000. The doctor copay for a primary care visit is $30. And for a specialist, it would be $70. And for prescription drugs, the generic, for a 31-day supply would be $15, and for a 90-day, it would be $45. On the Active Care Primary Plus, the employee-only plan, the employees would pay $73 a month. The employee and spouse would pay $862 a month. The employee and child plan, they would pay $419 a month. And for the employee and family, it would be $1,207 a month. The deductibles would be $1,200 for the individual and $2,400 for the family. Primary care copay would be $15, and a specialist copay would be $70. And for prescription drugs, the generic 31-day supply would be $15, and the 90-day would be $45. Now, for those two plans, they are only a statewide network. You must go to an in-network provider, and a PCP is required, as well as a referral for a specialist. When you get to the TRS high deductible plan, it is both an in-state network and a nationwide network. It does not require a PCP. So therefore, the employee-only plan, the employee would pay $14 a month. If they're on the employee and spouse plan, they would pay $752 a month. If they're employee and child, they would pay $318 a month. And for the employee and family, it would be $1,056 a month. The individual deductible on the in-network side would be $3,000, and the family deductible would be $6,000. Again, for the doctor copay, for the in-network, it would be 30% for both the primary care and a specialist after they have met their deductible. And for prescription drugs, it would be a 20% copay after they have met their deductible. And as with all things, there are pros and cons. So we're going to look at a few on the TRS Active Care versus the self-funded plan. So on the pro side, we have that it would be affordable per employee cost for the districts. It would be part of the Blue Cross Blue Shield provider network. And the employees would have 3 plan options that they could choose from. On the possible con side, all the plans do have an individual and family deductible. There is a gap plan that the employee can purchase that would help cover their deductible costs, but that would be at the employee's discretion, and they would pay for that cost. The TRS does require a personal care provider and specialist recommendations. And as Mr. Mesa mentioned, it does have the 5-year commitment. Now, again, regarding that 5-year commitment, it is a state law. It is part of our contract that we would sign with them that we stay in for the 5 years. It does not include the special transitional plan period. So the 5-year, if we were to move to the TRS, the 5 years would not start until September 1st of 2025. That would be our first year as part of that 5-year commitment. And the reason they do have this commitment is to protect TRS Active Care from the impact of employers leaving to seek low-cost coverage and then returning to TRS Active Care once they start experiencing high claims. And it creates volatility in the fund and raises costs for all employers that are already in the TRS Active Care. Again, as I mentioned earlier, on the district health plan selection is not part of the budget adoption process. At this time, we're just needing to, like we said, set the amount that the district is wanting to contribute towards a health plan. If we were to move to the TRS, again, the deadline to notify them would be September 5th, 2024. We have contacted them to help us to propose a price, but we have not actually told them that we are switching over, so just FYI. And as I also mentioned before, we did send out a health plan coverage survey to all employees. It's to help us generate employee feedback on the current health and prescription plans, to also get feedback on possible options for providing the employee health care for the 24-25 school year. And we do have a deadline to submit responses for this Friday, May 3rd. And then we will provide the responses that we get in a board update. That's all I have at this time. Any other questions?
So can I clarify something, Mr. Mesa?
Sure, Dr. Rios.
Can you go 2 slides back? The uncertainty in any plan that we choose is that we are trying to ensure that the district does not run out of fund balance. And I don't mean 75-day or 45-day. I'm just talking about fund balance in general. Because at that point, we would definitely have to take more draconian measures. But the scary part of any health insurance plan is that if we aren't able to control the deficit, TRS Active Care is going to raise their cost. There's no doubt about it. There's absolutely no way that it's not going to go up. We're just assuming it's going to go up at a lower rate than other insurances. But we'll definitely get a lot more information. The problem is that in trying to balance the budget, we'll ask employees for a contribution as one option. If the state does not kick in more money for public ed, the cost of TRS Active Care or any other plan is more than likely going to have to be passed on to the employees. It doesn't matter what plan we go with. They're all going to go up. But the scary part is that we continue to pass that on to employees, because remember, if our deficit doesn't go down fast enough and our expenses stay up here, if our expenses go up, the only option is to pass it on to the employees. So once we go down that path where we're asking employees to pay, it's going to continue to go up, because any insurance plan is going to go up. And that's the part about health insurance that is very uncertain. Now, up to this point, we have been able to provide a 100% insurance plan to our employees. We're also one of the few districts that's able to do that. But it's very uncertain. So making calculated decisions is the best anybody can do, any district, any board, any superintendent.
I just want to say I'm sorry, Amy, for interrupting. But I'll say it again, as Mr. Overfelt mentioned, we're not the only ones. We're not the only ones. And I saw the update that, last year, 12 districts adopted deficit budget. It'll be 5 times as many more districts that adopted a deficit budget. I've been talking to individuals, Marion ISD, Southwest ISD. They all adopted a deficit budget. And what we want to do as trustees is what was promised, not to cut staff. When we gave that 6%, we're not going to cut staff. I asked the question, we're not going to cut staff. No, we're not going to cut. We didn't get any money. But if we borrow money from the fund balance for 1 year, we'll be okay when the next legislative session meets. and everybody goes to Austin because everyone is hurting with the cost of living. And we heard from the insurance update, some drugs like Ozempic for diabetics, yes, they lose the weight, but yeah, we're talking $1,000 a month that insurance has to pay for that. And we have people, individuals that raised the cost of insurance because either they need a liver transplant or surgeries that take a lot of the money from the insurance companies. So again, we saw a very small number last year. Last year was not like this year that we experienced with no additional new monies coming in. I praise everyone sitting here and administration as well that we have a healthy fund balance, that we can be okay for 1 year, not 2 years. But we also need to look at other options, as I mentioned, insurance. We don't know what the bottom line will be. And then the other part is that to be able to save jobs, everyone will need to contribute a fair share, because we're looking at hourly wage and, they don't earn as much as teachers or principals or administrative staff, and so something that's appropriate for everyone. But sorry for interrupting all this time, okay?
No, sir.
Anyone else want to interject something? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next item we have is item C, budget projections. Again, Amy, promise not to ask so many questions.
Thank you, sir. All right. Good evening once again, President Mesa, Dr. Rios, and members of the board. This evening, I would like to provide you with some updates on our budget projections since our last workshop. As pointed out in our TASB presentation earlier, we are at or above market pay in all categories. So I'd like to take a minute and review how we got there. So this slide has the last 5 years of the general pay or increases that we adopted. So fiscal year 1920, the board adopted a 2.7 general pay increase for teachers. In addition, they received a House Bill 3 adjustment for teachers that had 0 to 4 years of experience, received an additional $3,950 adjustment, and those with 5 years or more of experience received a $4,000 adjustment. In addition, there was a 10% general pay increase for all other personnel. In fiscal year 2021, the board adopted a 2% return to work stipend for all personnel. In fiscal year 21-22, the board adopted a 4% general pay increase for all personnel. In fiscal year 22-23, the board adopted a 3% general pay increase for all personnel, plus a 1.5% additional general pay increase for paraprofessionals and auxiliary. This was the year we also started the first phase of our moving the $15 hour minimum pay for our hourly workers, and we moved it up to $13.50 that year. This last fiscal year, the board adopted a 6% general pay increase for all personnel, and we concluded the second phase of the $15 an hour minimum wage for our hourly employees. So we increased it from the $13.50 to the $15. Another area I'd like to look at is our fund balance. So as Mr. Mesa alluded to, we did provide you with a board update this weekend regarding our financial integrity rating system, our first rating. So the indicator I'd like to point out is our indicator 6. And the indicator question reads, was the average change in assigned and unassigned fund balances over 3 years less than a 25% decrease? The second part of the question reads, did the current year's assigned and unassigned fund balances exceed 75 days of operational expenditures? So this is a two-part question. So if we were to answer no to the first one regarding the average of the 3 years, as long as we had the 75 days of operational expenditures, we would what they call pass. This is a ceiling indicator. It's a pass or fail question. So as long as if we say no to the first question, as long as we can answer yes to the second, we would be considered to pass that indicator. If the school district fails this indicator, the maximum points and the highest rating that this district could receive is 89 points, which would be a B or above standard achievement. And also just a note, out of the 1,031 districts, only 11 school districts failed this indicator last year, which was based on their 2022-23, their 21-22 fiscal year data. So just to look at some projections moving forward, for the 22-23 first rating, which was based on our 21-22 fiscal year, this was the release in November 2023. This was the public hearing we had. Our percent change in fund balance was an increase of 7.34%, and we had the 75 days cash on hand. Our estimated 2023-24 first for fiscal year 22-23 with the estimated release of November of 2024, based on our audit information that I was able to calculate, our percent change in fund balance should be again over those 3 years, should be an increase of 7.36%, and again we have the 75 days cash on hand. The estimated for 2024-25 first, which will be based on this current year's fiscal year, which will be released around November of 2025, based on the budget projections that we have, our percent change in fund balance will actually decrease 16.74%. And we should have the 75 days cash on hand. So again, we should pass the indicator. However, if we were to adopt a deficit fund balance for 24-25, that would lower our fund balance and risk not passing that first part of indicator 6. Therefore, in order to maintain an A rating, we would need to maintain the 75 days of cash on hand. So this slide is something else that we have shared with the board. I've done some research on what other districts' proposed budget cuts are. And just some of the ones that are out there again are personnel layoffs, campus closures, reroute bus routes to possibly save on fuel, again, personnel layoffs, hiring freezes, sale of property, possibly cutting some programs, closing a pre-K campus in order to distribute them to other campuses, increase the student-teacher ratio, and possibly reshape some attendance boundaries. So at this time, Dr. Rios will take it.
I'm going to do the presentation on the interactive workbook, but based on what was presented here in the last one, are there any questions, Mr. Mesa or members of the board?
I'll open it up for board members.
No, just a disclaimer, that last slide that you showed there, in case anyone's watching and not paying attention, that's what other districts are doing. We are not saying we're gonna close campuses, we are not saying we're going to lay off and stuff like that, because when I initially saw it, it freaked me out. There, so, that's what other districts are doing.
Can we also disclaim that no decision has been made either? Because those are some of the calls that I've gotten, that we've already made the decision, everything's already set in stone, things like that. We have not made a decision on anything. These have been merely proposals that have been given to us, but there has not been a vote taken on any of these things. So just to kind of ease, I know we've been hearing some of that saying it's already been done, that we already said, yes, we're packed it. Nothing has been done until we get to the June meeting, and that's why we're looking at all these proposals. So just wanted to make sure that, people understand that as well. These are just what we're looking at right now to take into consideration, and then the board will make their decision. Am I correct, Mr. Mesa?
Correct. I just want to reiterate again that that's a one plus that we have, is that we start the budget process early. Marion hadn't met yet, Southwest hadn't met yet, to see what they're going to do. But I'm glad that, we're in our second budget meeting already.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and just, we simply provided what other districts are doing because we were asked, and so we did some research based on press releases for other districts. But that's them, that is not us. I'm going to review the budget workbook with y'all based on some of the discussions that we've had, just so that we can consider different options. I think everyone has received the budget workbook, so this is mainly a review of reflecting on some of your input. Okay. Again, we have a whole month to go. Today they went over the general pay increase and what it would cost if the board was to provide a 1%, 2%, or 3% increase. The highest one being close to $2.5 million at 3%, 1.8 at 2%, and 1.2 at 1%. For the purposes of this exercise, we are selecting no general pay increase. Doesn't mean this is a recommendation. It doesn't mean, it's just for the purposes of this workbook, of this exercise, no pay increase. Okay. In terms of personnel, what we had discussed earlier was elementary campus librarians would generate a savings of $600,000 by placing them in teaching positions, not cutting positions, transitioning to teaching positions. We have selected no, which means they would stay in their current position. Okay. We did the same thing for art teachers. It would generate a savings of $541. Again, we selected no. And assistant principals having every other campus, they would generate 580,000. Again, we selected no. So no personnel changes in this scenario. Everything stays where they're at.
May I interject something?
Yes, Mr. Mesa.
This was a board member's input.
In terms of having,
No on there?
yeah, just for the purposes of this exercise. I want to get to fund balance at the end, yes. Yeah. And just to be fair, it was more than one board member that asked us to look at that. But at the end of the whole budget, what we try to do is balance the budget and affect the least amount of employees. But again, these are just administrative recommendations. For the purpose of the insurance, we went through it already. The only reason we're selecting the TRS Active Care as an activity for this scenario is so that every employee can have insurance at no cost to them, like we have been doing now. So for the purposes, we selected switching to TRS Active Care. Again, it's just for the purposes of this exercise. Employee travel, if we eliminated everybody's travel, we would save about $93,000 for the year. Student travel, if we eliminated the student travel, And by eliminating student travel, I want to be clear, it's just overnight travel. It is not eliminating all travel, just saving on hotels and the extra meal for going the night before. That would generate about $136,000. Again, for the purposes of this exercise, we are not selecting to eliminate any overnight travel, which means for the purposes of this exercise, overnight trips for athletic tournaments, overnight trips for UIL academics, all of that would continue. Under operations, we've set aside money for Garfield to continue to replace her HVAC units, the HVAC repairs replacement at the annex buildings, and here at the SPC. Everything else that we reviewed, we're still recommending no on that. In technology, we removed the service trucks, and we just left the HVAC and the E-rate funding. The E-rate funding, we leave it there because if we spend $60,000, we get $360,000 back to the district in investment. On the committed projects, we're putting the money from the life skills roadway back into the fund balance so that there's money to cover expenses. We are putting the money back for remodeling what is now Cardwell back into the fund balance, which is $1.4 million, and the Garfield retention pond at $80,000. Because we have a memorandum of understanding with the city for Cody Warlaw and the Del Rio Middle School parking lot, we have left those intact. Now to the proposed budget. Okay. Assuming that our revenue stays the same, which at this point it appears that it will. The state is not going to have a special session, so they're not going to give us any additional funding. So our wages and benefits would stay at 77.5. Our health insurance contribution from the district would stay at 8.8 million. The money that we spend on substitutes and extra pay is 1.3 million. And again, if we go with TRS Active Care, we will save $1.1 million. Previously, it was a little higher, but we updated the values to reflect the Region 15 cost. So entire salaries and benefits would be 86.5, close to $87 million. The campus budgets, department operations, state programs, they all stay the same. We are not saving money because there's no employee reductions. There's no student travel reductions. We still have to pay the loan we took to fix the ACs a few years ago, and the technology plan would be $208,000. Based on this, our total expenses will be $106,688,000, which would provide us a deficit of almost $5.4 million, $5,364,000 to be exact. Our estimated fund balance is $28.6 million. That money we use to cover the deficit, this projected deficit here, the 5.364 deficit. So we cover it. That leaves us an ending fund balance of $23,291,000. Again, the committed projects that we said we would no longer do, we placed that back into the fund balance. It now brings us to a fund balance of $25.2 million. Of course, to have 75 days cash on hand, we would require $21.9 million. That still leaves us an excess fund balance of $3.3 million. So this number is important for a couple of reasons. One, if we change insurance plans, it doesn't have to be TRS Active Care. It just has to be a change to the insurance plan. Whether the employees make up the difference, or we go to a less expensive plan, or a combination of both. We don't even have to do TRS Active Care. We can come up with another plan but it has to be a combination, and we have to save that amount of money. So if we change the insurance and we do not provide a raise, we don't have to transition anybody back in the classroom. It leaves us $3.3 million. However, somebody might say, okay, in this scenario, well, let's go ahead and give a raise. Let's go ahead and give a raise because employees are going to contribute to the insurance, so let's give a raise, and that way it balances out. Well, unfortunately, if it balances out, that expense stays there for next year, and we're again gambling that the state is going to come in and make up the deficit of $5.3 million. If the state does not make up the deficit, then the following year, I know that the first recommendation we made appeared pretty draconian, pretty drastic, to say return librarians and art teachers to the classroom. But if the state does not help us make up that deficit, the following year, we're looking at twice the cuts. We're looking at, it doesn't have to be librarians and art teachers, it could be music teachers and anybody else. We're not, I'm not saying it has to be those two, but we have to do that amount of cuts times 2. That's the only reason that not taking an action this year puts us in a precarious situation, because one, not providing a raise this year just about necessitates, demands that we give a raise the following year. Can't not give a raise 2 years in a row. Okay. So if the state doesn't come through and give us additional funding the following year, we're faced with making twice the cuts that we had initially recommended for this year. And that makes it very difficult. So on the one hand, I don't think we can get away with changing the insurance plan. That's a must. We don't have to decide when we approve the budget or when we recommend the budget for approval and y'all take it. But we do have to make a decision between September, and we have to commit to saying this is how much the district will contribute to the insurance. Any amount that goes up is going to fall on the employees. And there can be other cuts. However, the other cuts are not going to increase the fund balance. I charged Cabinet with having a 10% budget reduction for every department that they supervise, not including contributions to the campus budgets, just in personnel and expenses, whether it be software or not. So there will be other costs that we reduce, but it will not eliminate the $5 million deficit. So I just want to be clear. This scenario that we shared would work, but it involves not giving a raise and agreeing that whatever the difference in whatever insurance plan you choose, the cost would be what we're recommending, and anything above that would go to the employees. Questions, Mr. Mesa, or board members?
Yes, sir. I just want to be creative again, and, you know, when we look at, and I'm glad that Mr. Orfeld mentioned, you know, that we're not doing this, but there's other areas. At one time, there was one principal between 7th and 8th grade, and now we have 2. I lost count of how many assistant principals we have there now, and security added and so forth. I mean, it was needed. The only thing is, there are areas where we need to think, first of all, that we need to cut there because we're in a dire situation. The other thing is, I would like to ask Amy to see what the amount would be for us to collect either one scenario, $50 from each employee per month, and the other one will be $100 per employee per month, so we can make up some of that money that we take from the deficit budget. Again, we're not the only ones in this predicament, but we have to be creative and find ways. And you know, it wasn't like that before. That we were going to cut librarians and we were going to cut art teachers and assistant principals. And yet, in my mind, I kept thinking, hey, yeah, we could cut one principal from 7th and 8th grade. We could cut 2 assistant principals. You know. Dean of instruction, we never had a dean of instruction. And there are other positions in administration level that we can think of, because we're in a dire situation now. And it could be done. And yeah, you save $200,000 there. Easy. So I'm just being creative and thinking out loud, because we have to think in that fashion, because we'll be okay for 1 year. You know, I know that eventually Governor Abbott is going to push for vouchers. He needs 2 more representatives to vote his way. And it's a sad thing, but that's who the campaign contributors are. These people that have those private schools and charter schools. They're the ones that contribute to his campaign. But again, we're not the only ones in this predicament. So I want for us to think, you know, we're cutting a lot of travel. And yeah, I'd love to go to UIL events, and yeah, competition is great. But I think there's other ways of looking at budget reductions. And I know that's a giant school to operate 7th and 8th grade, but we never had that many people there. That I lost count of the assistant principals and dean of instruction, and there's some areas that we need to start thinking about that first before we start cutting other areas. There's still time to do that.
Yes, sir. Mr. Massa, just to be clear, we will add all of these positions in there, but we have to remember that any positions that are funded with title money do not help balance our budget. I'd have to go check to be sure how the deans at Del Rio Middle School are funded. But anyone that's funded from federal dollars on any positions will not help the budget. We're going to review that again tomorrow in Cabinet to make sure that we put every position out there to select from, to give more choices. That was going to be part of the 10% reduction that we had already counted on for the everything that's not in the teaching area. That's about $1 million, Mr. Mason.
And I just want, you know, the employees to understand that we're trying to do our job here, but we have to be creative and think in manner of doing what we need to do to be able to carry on for our students, and those are areas that sometimes, you know, you think like, okay, we can't cut there. Yeah, we can cut. We can cut those administrative positions there and save us some money, but I'd like to also see the amount of money if teachers, employees contribute, hourly, every employee contributes towards the insurance premium. And just to have those numbers so we can make a decision when the time comes. And everything, you know, again, I'm sorry if I came through a little bit too strong, but I don't want to be locked in for 5 years and then hear all these complaints that, you know, we're in the same boat, can't get out.
We'll provide all those options, Mr. Mesa, but unfortunately, those options of having the employees contribute above what they're contributing now, that doesn't help the deficit unless we go with the minimum district contribution. Right now, we're budgeting $420 per employee per month for insurance. So if we change insurance to any plan, if it's more than $420, that is already going to necessitate an employee contribution. But we'll give you an option of $50, of $75, and $100 just to see what that looks like. But it all comes down to how much the district is willing to contribute to the plan. Right now, the plan that we recommended at $420, whether it's TRS or a different plan, it can't be more than $420. Anything above that has to go to the employee. And in all fairness, it very possibly could be more than $100 a month. But we'll provide you all the board update on what an MOU with another insurance carrier would entail, and get some more information so that the board has the ability to make that decision. The good news is that even if we went with a different carrier for next year, we would have some fund balance to cover any unforeseen costs. But it would just be for 1 year. After that, the cuts become a lot more drastic than what we shared at the previous budget workshop.
And sir, you know, when we go to these conferences, all these exhibitors that are there, they're all vendors. Even some of us that we have broken bread with, they're insurance people. It wouldn't take much for you to know those individuals and make a phone call and find out what each employee, how much they contribute towards each employee.
I have, Mr. Mesa, I have one that's calling me tomorrow. I have another one that's making a trip to Del Rio on Wednesday because they're all interested in working for the district. So it's not for knocking on doors or making phone calls. Like I said, one's going to have a phone conference tomorrow. Another one's going to have come in person on Wednesday. And I don't turn anybody away.
No promises,
yeah,
just
yeah,
all I want to see is numbers.
absolutely. We're on it already. And no disrespect to them, but they're vendors, so they want your business. They want your business because they get paid on the Aflacs that they sell and the vision, and so that's what they want. And we'll provide you all the information.
I visit the exhibits to get little trinkets, but I also I also know what they do. You know, and honestly, I could save money to the city right now because they're paying too much for insurance. And I know some people that have signed up other municipalities and they're paying a lot less. But, and you know, in all reality, honestly, I wish we could all get together, city, county, hospital, everyone, you know, and have better premiums. You know, and we all heard it. Ozempic takes $1,000 a month. Yes, we have a lot of diabetes here in this area, and it rose the cost of premiums everywhere. Insurance goes up every year. The very little that we give the teachers, it goes, and now, I mean, inflation's out of control. Just, I went to McDonald's today and I used to buy 20 nuggets and a basket of fries for $10. It's $12 now. As an example.
One final point, Mr. Mesa and board members, and then any questions that come. If we look at this fund balance here that is encouraged by the state, the 75 days cash on hand, the 21.9 million, we don't have to have that fund balance. I know other districts that only have a 45-day fund balance, but they're able to maintain it. And the way they're able to maintain it now is that now those are the districts that are making very serious cuts because they can't go any lower than the 45 days because of the 2 months that the state doesn't provide funding. You have to have cash flow. Otherwise, you can't do business. So those districts that decrease their fund balance to 45 days, those are the ones that now are closing a pre-K and sending the kids to their attendance zones. They are closing campuses and pushing the enrollment higher at someplace else. That's the danger of dipping below the 75-day fund balance, that you get to this spot where other districts are, and now they have to make these really drastic cuts because they have to have at least the cash on hand to operate those 2 months that TA doesn't fund you. They catch up later, but they need the money before. So it's very difficult because on the one hand, providing a raise is difficult. It's difficult because the state is not providing money, but it's also very difficult because we want to prevent from getting in the position where you do have to take very drastic measures. And once we start going to 75-day fund balance, once we get to that 45-day fund balance, then those issues become very real. And that's why those samples that we gave all up there, they're real. None of them are made up. They're all taken, and you've got have talked to trustees, and I've talked to superintendents. I talked to a bunch of superintendents last week, and they're in that position because they lowered their fund balance, and now they have to make those measures. And that's what we're trying to avoid. So I want to be clear. We as administration are only recommending measures that would prevent us from getting there. Is that the only solution? Absolutely not. There's other solutions, but they carry a lot more risk. And we just have to be very open about it and very, very transparent about it. There are other solutions. We can't borrow from fund balance. But once we get to that 45-day fund balance and the state doesn't help us out, the cuts are a lot more encompassing. They affect a lot more people, and that's what we're trying to avoid. And it's difficult. It's difficult for the board having to make this decision. It's difficult for administration to make the recommendation.
And I just want people to understand, we're trying to do our job here and realize that cost of living has gone up crazy, and for us not to be able to give a raise, it's not fair. But, we gave a pretty good raise last year that we're not able to provide this year. But we don't want to see teachers not have a job or change from librarian to going back into the classroom. We don't want to do that, and so we're looking at everything that we can. So we hope that we can have a clear mind when we do come and have to make that decision as a board. And I know Amy's just a messenger bringing the information to us, but Mr. Orfel.
Right quick, the survey that went out for the health insurance, what would that have gone out under? Because I've had several employees message me and say, we never got anything there, and I know there's an all-user error sometimes where that help is. So who would it have come from?
Let me ask Ms. Sandra Hernandez. She's the one that shared that with the teachers. So the message would be from Ms. Sandra Hernandez. And what was the subject, Ms. Hernandez? The subject of the email?
It was the insurance survey.
What was the title of the email?
It was the insurance summary survey. Went through campus groups, departmental groups.
Some coordinators here too.
I stand corrected. If I remember, Ms. Hernandez, that email went to principals, and principals forwarded it so that it wouldn't get returned. Now, for departments, they would have gone from the cabinet member in charge of the group. So if you're on a campus, that email would have come from your principal. If you're outside of the campus, it would have come from any one of the cabinet members or directors. So if you can tell me afterwards, Mr. Overfelt, if it was at a particular campus, we can follow up with that principal. But campus people would have gotten that email from their principals.
Okay.
We need to probably check on that because we have some employees saying no, it hadn't gone out yet. So,
We'll definitely, we'll check, but we were clear with the principals when we visited with them, and I know that they got the email because I got it as well, but we'll check.
Anyone else with a question? Okay, we'll go on to the next item, technology and operations. Mr. Chapa. Item 14A, consideration to approve a change order with DLP Construction and Facility Management. Let's see, in the amount not to exceed $41,080.60. Funding source, committed funds to substitute the fence picket size for the Irene Cardwell Elementary Fence Project. Mr. Chapa.
Good evening, President Mesa, Dr. Rios, board members. Previously, at the beginning of the year, the board approved a contract or PO over $25,000 for DLP to fence Irene Cardwell Elementary. As part of the plans and specs, the picket sizes specified were half-inch square piping and 14-gauge steel. Unfortunately, there's been a shortage of this material availability. We explored options to decrease the thickness of the material to a 16-gauge. However, that presented to be a weaker material, and in the effort to err on the side of caution, we proposed going to a 3/4-inch square piping with the same thickness of material to provide a stronger picket. Having said that, the contractor came in with a proposed change order to increase the cost due to the size of the material of the pickets.
Mr. Mesa,
Yes, Dr.
Just- just for procedural transparency, we need to close the workshop and open the public meeting. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, so we had a budget / special call board meeting for one item, and this is the one item that we're having. So if we're okay, board members, can we close the budget workshop?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes.
we'll close the budget workshop and go on with our meeting, which is one item. Now, Mr. Chapa, could you provide us with the difference in the amount? I don't remember from the last time.
I'm sorry.
The estimate from the previous meeting that we had?
The initial total cost of the
Right,
fence.
the initial total cost was $254,000.
Okay. So it's an increase of $41,000 more?
Correct. And the overall cost, if the change order is approved, is still within the original budgeted amount. So there's favorability once the bids were received.
So we went from half-inch to 3/4.
Correct. And we kept the thickness of the material that we requested, the wall thickness.
And so the reason being that it's not available?
It's basically a supply and demand. Most of this material is manufactured in Mexico. So when companies need this material, when it first comes available, they jump on it.
Okay.
And so, and part of the issue also is that the tops, the tips, since we're also going from half-inch to 3/4 inch, those have to be replaced. So it's not just the pickets that are being affected.
Any questions from board members? Okay, no questions. You want to read the recommendation?
Yes, sir. It is the recommendation of administration that the Board of Trustees approve the change order with DLP Construction and Facility Management, LLC, in the amount not to exceed $41,080.60 for the Irene Cardwell Elementary Fence Project.
Thank you. You've heard the recommendation. There's a motion by Mr. Galindo. Is there a second to the motion? Ms. Gonzalez, all those in favor? Motion carries. Becky?
No, I'm gonna abstain to.
Oh, okay. 6 yes and 1 abstention. Okay,
Thank you, sir.
it passes. Okay, there being no other items on the agenda, is there a motion for adjournment? Dr. Rios?
We're just announcing that we are tabling the closed session items.
Okay. There is one item that Dr. Rios tabled, and that's the one in closed session, so we don't have any closed session today. So motion for adjournment?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Orfeld, seconded by Amy Haynes. All those in favor? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you and good night, everyone.